Welcome and thank you for joining us today for How Network Teams Are Powering Stronger Cybersecurity, Closing Gaps in Vulnerability Assessments and Device Visibility. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Seamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Infrastructure and Operations at EMA, and Brad Renbolt, Senior Project Manager at NetAlly. Seamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AI ops-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. Brad has more than 30 years of experience in the computing, networking, and storage sectors in various development and technical management roles. He holds a master's degree in electrical engineering as well as an MBA in management. And before I hand things over to today's speakers, I wanted the audience to know that Seamus and Brad will be concluding today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback, a copy of the slides, as well as a video from NetAlly, so I encourage you to check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Seamus McGillicuddy. Seamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Raleigh mentioned, today's topic is about network teams powering stronger cybersecurity by closing gaps in critical areas like vulnerability assessments, device visibility. I'm going to talk to you about some trends that I'm seeing, and then I'm going to hand it over to Brad to talk specifically about what he sees in terms of vulnerability assessments, device visibility, things like that. But the bulk of my presentation is going to be looking at how this is really about network teams collaborating with and supporting cybersecurity around these types of things that we're discussing here. And so my presentation is going to be sort of a research-driven look at that collaboration and how it plays into these topics. I coined the term NetSecOps about 6 years ago because I was seeing a lot of network teams who were either being pulled or pushed into working more actively, more collaboratively, more supportively with their counterparts in the cybersecurity organizations. And I decided to describe that as NetSecOps. I think I can't say that I was the first person to use the term, but I published research in 2020 that used the terminology. So every 2 years, I survey enterprises about this topic and publish a refreshed report on the topic. And a lot of what I'll be covering in this presentation will be based on research that we published in early 2024 on the subject of NetSecOps. So first off, the partnership between networking and security groups is intensifying. On the left-hand side, you see surveys we did in 2020, 2021, and the end of 2023. That research was published in the first quarter of 2024, but it was a survey that spanned December 2023. And so we asked the same question, like, what kinds of growth or intensification are you seeing in terms of collaboration between network engineering and operations, information security, cybersecurity, IT security, SecOps? And on the right-hand side of that left-hand chart, you see significant increase in collaboration is steadily going up. 29%, 34%, 36%. There's this sort of upward trend in terms of people being pulled more tightly together. Everything else kind of fluctuates. Some would increase, no change, whatever. But that trend line and significant increase in collaboration is steady. I'll refresh it in a year, and I expect it to go up some more. We also asked them, like, how do you organize the networking and security functions in your enterprise? And the majority still have siloed groups, 51%, that sort of blue semicircle on the right, say we have separate network and security teams. Almost 36% told us that they had recently fully converged networking and security into one group. So that might mean that, instead of having a CIO and a CISO organization, it's all been converged. And then 14% said they had partially converged these groups, which tells me that they've, and I hear this in my conversations with network engineering managers and directors. Like, they tell us that, one, they're eliminating some middle management to bring people closer together as groups. They are creating boards or committees, centers of excellence around networking and security to tackle certain projects and certain gaps. For instance, we're adopting secure access service edge, and that's a convergence of networking and security on the wide area in the cloud, and so we want to work together on that. Or we're deploying something in the cloud that needs guardrails around networking and security, or we're building a new access network, upgrading switching and Wi-Fi in our offices, and we need to make sure that we're sort of aligned on things like network design, network compliance, vulnerability assessment, network access control, or increasingly universal zero trust network access is a topic. So they create these committees to execute and execution teams to execute on those efforts. The outcomes that we see in the research, when these groups work together, they're more secure, they're more efficient, and they're quicker at solving problems. On the left-hand side, you see the top benefits that people reported to us on their collaboration efforts between networking and security. That ensure that new vulnerabilities don't crop up. 40% say they're just more efficient. People are reducing overlapping work and effort around certain things like network design, security policy management, things like that. And then many of them are also reporting that they're just faster detecting and resolving network trouble, and they're faster detecting and resolving security issues. In fact, other research I've done over the years has found that it's quite often that when a complex IT service problem emerges and the network team gets pulled into a a, 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 um, a, a meeting, where representatives of different teams are sort of sitting around a virtual or physical table and trying to figure out what the source of the trouble is. Firefighting exercise, pointing fingers at each other. It's the network. It's the network. It's the network. Um, uh, People have told us in our research that actually something that presents itself as a network issue will often turn out to be a security incident. And so we start by troubleshooting it or responding to it as a performance problem. And then somewhere along the lines of gathering data and doing correlations or root cause analysis, we realize that it's a security incident. And then we pull in the security team. The security team may or may not be already repeating that work in a different space. When they're working together, consequently, faster detection and resolution of network trouble, faster detection and resolution of security problems, because instead of being on separate sides of the table or in separate meetings, they're more likely to be working together, maybe in shared tools and in reports and dashboards, understanding together what the issue is. And this engineering manager, the mid-market hospitality enterprise kind of echoes that. He says, so he told me last year, my team now has exposure to the security team's environment. It helps us troubleshoot a lot of issues, but it also helps us make the right decisions for the business. We know each other's environments, and we're eliminating knowledge gaps. We know what's happening in the other tool set. We know what's happening in the other domain. We know more quickly if it's a security issue or a performance issue. Most NetSecOps partnerships need to improve. Only 45% of the people we surveyed for last year's report told us that they are completely successful with their efforts to collaborate between networking with their security counterparts. So there's a lot of room for improvement. I wouldn't say that a lot of people are completely failing at this, but a lot of people recognize that they need to optimize how they work together across these silos. Um, and even if those silos are broken down by some effort to converge, there's still like a cultural echo of the silo that needs to be pushed against as well. So we asked survey respondents, what are your biggest barriers to collaboration? There were two responses that are sort of tied for the number one issue. One, data quality and data authority issues. So quite often, uh, the network team will have its own tools for collecting data from the network, and that becomes a one or more repositories of data that is their sort of truth about the state of the network or the intent for the network. And the security team has its own tools that may or may not have a certain level of intelligence about what's happening on the network. They may have no data about the network, actually. It may rely 100% on the network team for any data about the network. They might just be monitoring, what's happening with hosts and what's happening with data that's crossing the network, leaving hosts or coming to hosts. And so there's sort of a challenge around, whose data set about the network is the best quality and most authoritative. And that sort of comes from having in some ways a siloed tool set that prevents them from sort of having a full um, authoritative view of what's happening on the network. Budget issues is the other big issue, the other big problem. We don't have enough money to adopt new technologies that help us work together, that give us a universal view of things. We don't have enough money to train people up on their knowledge gaps. And so we can't break down the silos because we don't have the budget. Architectural complexity is another big secondary challenge. Like, we have a multi-cloud network. We don't have good, consistent approaches to that around networking and security. So there's like no foundation upon which we can have like an effective collaboration because there's just so much swivel chair management. Same thing, maybe you've got like separate vendors for switching and Wi-Fi, and that sort of fragments management as well. There's a lot of different ways that architecture can be complex. And I was just kind of speaking about the network. If you talk to a security engineer, they'll have their own point of view on what constitutes complexity in their environment. And then other secondary issues are skills gaps, like networking people tend to know quite a bit about security, but they aren't following it as their primary uh, imperative. So like every day new threats are emerging, new tools are being sold, and like networking guys don't have enough time in the day to sort of keep on top of everything. And so a security guy comes to him and is like, hey, this is the tool that we're using to do this now to protect this. And the networking guy has never heard of it and looks at it and is just completely lost. And on the other side, like networking engineers always tell me that security teams come to them and just don't know much about how networking works, and as a consequence, they ask for things that are just ridiculous, like or not possible to be done. Like oh, could you just give me a full packet capture of every single packet that went from one VLAN to another in the data center, and the network team will be like, that's a lot of data and we don't have that. That's not possible. Like that is the type of questions that a security person who doesn't know a lot about networks and packets and things might ask for. Cultural barriers, like these people just don't trust each other. They think of each other as like being from opposite sides of the company. Like they've probably reported into different C-level groups, C-level executives. They think of themselves as having diametrically opposed goals. Like a network team wants to provide connectivity, the security team wants to prevent it. That's kind of like a very simplified view of things, but it's the truth. And then they just don't have the tools to enable this collaboration. So 42% of IT leaders tell us that they try to improve collaboration, but by deploying and adopting tools that these two groups share as much as they can, despite things like skills gaps, cultural barriers, budget issues. So how do network teams step up to support cybersecurity? Security team needs data and insights from the network team. As you can see here, 96% on the left, 96% of the people we surveyed in our most recent research said that the security team's need to analyze network data drives increased collaboration between the groups. And 64% describe that as a significant driver of collaboration. So the security team comes and says, we need this kind of data. We need to analyze it. Maybe we need your help analyzing it because we don't know how, or we lack the tools to do so, or we don't know how to get access to the data. Can you stream it to this and maybe enrich it with this? That opens up all kinds of discussions and challenges and budget requests. And the insight piece is key. It's not just about providing the data, but also providing insights on that data. 86% of network teams told us that they have security insights coming out of their tools. They have tools in the hands of the network teams that produce security insights. And they may give like role-based access control to those tools to the security team, but a lot of times the security team might say, well, I'm looking at this and I really don't understand what it says. Can you just provide me with a report or like a custom dashboard, or can you just tell me what it means? There's a lot of that. Also, we found that when the network team has tools that provide network inventory assessments specifically, like this is what we have on the network, this is what's connected to the network, this is, here's what we see in terms of hosts, etc., then collaboration improves. Like the security team wants the network team to be able to tell them what's actually in the network, what's meant to be in the network, what isn't meant to be in the network. The network team monitors security risk very closely now as well. 72% of the people we surveyed said that they're actively monitoring for network vulnerabilities. Half also said they're actively monitoring for compliance with network standards and golden configs and design standards and security policies. And then half also said they're actively monitoring for suspicious behavior on the network. But 48% of the people in our survey told us that they see gaps in their ability to monitor all those issues. They say they can maybe catch like 80% of what they're looking for with the tools they have, but they don't have enough end-to-end visibility. They're seeing gaps in their ability to actively monitor their stuff. It might be architectural complexity, it might be budget, but they just don't have a full picture, the universal ability to do this. However, and also in network teams that told us that they have those visibility gaps, reported less success in their efforts to collaborate with the security group. Zero trust is a big driver of what we see here on this convergence of networking security and this collaboration of networking security. More recently, I did some research towards the end of 2024 on zero trust networks, where we surveyed several hundred IT decision makers about what the network team is doing within a zero trust initiative, because we find that there's a lot of expertise in the networking team around zero trust enablement. And in fact, 1 in 5 of IT organizations told us that zero trust is a major driver of NetSecOps collaboration. And when zero trust kicks off, 88% of security teams will usually try to form a strong partnership with the network team because they recognize that enablement capability within the network engineering group. So like, and in my experience, just talking to people, surveying people, like network teams are the experts on things like zero trust on secure remote access. Like they usually own the VPN, for instance, right? And they're probably going to evaluate a ZTNA solution or whatever you do to sort of modernize your secure remote access for zero trust security. They also know a lot about network segmentation. They're using the tools that segment the networks, and they're usually maintaining different types of segmentation depending on what kind of network it is. It's the data center, it's the campus network, it's the cloud. They know how to do that. They know what subnets and VLANs mean, and the security team doesn't usually. And they also have visibility. They are the ones that have the deep visibility in the network that provide, that discover things, monitor things. They're the key deliverer of the visibility that Zero Trust needs. Because network visibility is essential to Zero Trust. 64% of Zero Trust projects in my research require network teams to deliver visibility for ongoing Zero Trust operations. They're looking at changes to the network. They're looking at behavioral anomalies. They're looking for rogue devices. 34% told us that poor visibility into the network is one of their biggest Zero Trust pain points. And 26% said that when they have poor visibility into network assets, it undermines their ability to implement Zero Trust network segmentation. So visibility into assets, doing something like discovery of what's on your network, looking for rogue devices, whatever, like is critical to an effective approach to Zero Trust segmentation, to limit those zones of trust, to limit the amount of impact a breach can have on your network. So key takeaways. Network and security teams are clearly boosting collaboration. It's steadily, the number of organizations that have intense levels of collaboration and partnership are between networking and security is steadily going up year to year. Effective collaboration reduces security risk and compliance risk. It drives efficiency in operations by reducing overlaps in work and duplicative work. It accelerates detection and resolution of both networking problems and security problems or incidents. And network teams that can detect vulnerabilities like in anomalous behavior and compliance violations are better security partners. They're better partners for cybersecurity. Network visibility is especially important to this partnership. Whether you're doing Zero Trust or not, it's important. But when Zero Trust comes into the picture, it is essential because poor visibility, a lack of tools for visibility leads to ineffective Zero Trust segmentation and ineffective Zero Trust implementation. So also IT leadership is pushing network and security teams to invest in shared tools that enable better visibility and collaboration. And with that, I think I've teed things up for Brad. I've talked too long, so I'm going to hand it off to him and put myself on mute until we go to Q&A.
Thanks, Seamus, for that great insight in terms of NetOps and SecOps collaboration and partnering, along with the importance of network teams. And I'm going to kind of bridge off of what you talked about there in the context of the edge network. And so, of course, collaboration runs the gamut from the data center core to the edge. But we here at NetAlly really focus specifically on the perimeter or the periphery. So next slide, please. So the edge network, we here at NetAlly refer to it as the Wild West or chaos or what have you, but there's so much activity, so much thrashing that goes on at the network edge. I mean, just think about it. Whenever you walk on a campus, you walk into a building, your first thought is, well, let me connect to the local Wi-Fi network, and so I get better coverage and better access to my apps and so forth, right? And so what it really means is that you have elevated levels of threat and exposure, excuse me. And so how can that be manifested, right? Proliferation of endpoints, both the type and the quantity of those, right? Again, just imagine a large, maybe university campus or, I don't know, organization that has multiple buildings on a campus, right? Ubiquitous connectivity. So again, you got people coming and going all the time, connecting and leaving and what have you. And of course, most of those individuals are perfectly fine and benign, but unfortunately, as we all know, given the amount of breaches that occur, some of them are not. Undetected vulnerabilities, that's what keeps security and network teams up at night. Am I missing something? Is there a zero-day one out there lurking someplace that somehow my centralized tools have missed? Unsecured connections, and then another big one, misconfigured networks. You think you got things locked down, proper segmentation, what have you, but if you don't, There are those that can try to find those, and if they find them, they can exploit them, and if they can exploit them, they can gain entry to the network and then move laterally, which again is another one of those type of things that can keep organizations up at night. And obviously the net result of this is numerous attack vectors, numerous ways that individuals can gain access to that network, and all they need is one way, and then they're in. Next slide, please. So it's just not EMA and NetAlly talking about this. If you did a Google search, it'll save you a little bit of time. There's lots of reports out there that talk about this, issues at the perimeter. Here's one of them, CrowdStrike 2025 Global Trust Report. Just came out a couple months ago. One of the key takeaways, cybersecurity attacks continue to target devices at the network periphery where traditional EDR visibility is often limited. And as we move more and more into the network security space, we've really found that centralized tools are necessary and critical to making sure that your overall IT infrastructure is protected. But it's not sufficient. Again, at the network edge in particular, these tools can, under certain circumstances, for example, misconfigure network segmentation, rogue devices, unmanaged devices. They can miss things. And again, if they're missed, vulnerabilities can exist on them. And if vulnerabilities exist on them and someone can gain access to it, again, the exploitation can begin. Next slide, please. So in terms of the tools itself that NetAlly offers, it's Cyberscope. And we like to talk about it as the ultimate network and security operations tool, right? And I'm going to focus first on the security aspect of it, and then the network piece. And again, really speak to that partnership that Seamus spoke to earlier in terms of getting those two teams to work together, both from a network perspective, usability, user experience, what have you, and the security perspective. So let's start with the security capabilities of Cyberscope. First of all, discovery with integrated vulnerability scanning. We have fantastic discovery, and after we discover a device, we allow you to run vulnerability scans against those devices to understand specifically what the status of those devices are, if there's patches need to be put in place, or what have you. Network segmentation validation, when it comes to that, we're a little bit like trust but verify. Yes, you think you've got your network segmented properly, but we're actually going to connect locally with this tool right here. This is the Cyberscope, and actually verify that from the guest network, you can't get any place else, or whatever VLAN you want to test. We will check to make sure that in fact is true. Either you can get there or you cannot get there, as the case may be. Automated discovery monitoring. Cyberscope allows you to take your device, leave it powered on, and then every day, every week, actually go out, discover the network, find new devices, missing devices, or change devices. Now, again, all those can be very benign. Oftentimes they are, but any of those, either a device gone missing or a device being added, or even a device changing a channel, depending upon the circumstances, can be problematic and may be worth investigating. Wi-Fi security confirmation, we make sure that your entire security of your Wi-Fi is at the level that you expect it to be, and that there's not anything out there running that, again, could compromise the environment and offer an entry point for malefactors. And lastly, a fantastic capability of the tool is the ability to find rogue devices. I mean, they can be lurking any place, in the ceiling, in a cabinet, what have you. With our tools and a directional antenna, you can very quickly find those. And speaking directly to the zero trust piece of it, we have customers that use our tool to exactly what Seamus said here, to actually implement zero trust and validate that zero trust is properly functioning in their environment. Next slide, please. So we talked about the security aspect, but it's a little bit like, I always like to think of it as pushing for pleasure or pushing for pain. Oftentimes the security team is about locking things down and making sure access is just very constrained. Of course, that's critical. The networking team, of course, wants people that when they come on campus, whether it's university or a corporation, they want easy accessibility. And those two things, of course, can be balanced, but you have to make sure from a functional perspective that your network is running properly, right? So again, with Cyberscope, troubleshoot wired and wireless networks up to 10 gigs, simply and easily, push of a button. Fast and easy Wi-Fi and Bluetooth site surveys. That allows you to get in front of all those Wi-Fi issues before you get that dreaded phone call saying so-and-so classroom, the students can't get on, the smart board's not working. We try to get in front of it with our Wi-Fi surveys. You can verify 10 gig performance of critical services. So it's just not layer 2 and 3. Of course, that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Can users at the network edge get to the applications and services they're expecting to be able to connect to those and function? Our tool does that. You can also validate Wi-Fi network performance, looking for things like cross-channel interference, what have you, to make sure that wherever you are within that campus or that building, you get the connectivity that you need to do your job or to connect as required. And then lastly, we're not going to be able to talk about it a lot today because of time constraints, but all the tools from NetAlly, Cyberscope and beyond, connect to our NetAlly Link Live cloud-based collaboration, reporting, and analytics platform. Earlier, Seamus talked about that reporting necessary that for security team, and oftentimes, as Seamus said, they don't know a lot about the network details, specifically MAC addresses, IP addresses, but with Cyberscope in conjunction with Link Live, we're able to provide whatever level of information they need, whether it's C-level, security team, or someone else. With Link Live, you can connect and make that information available to anyone within the organization. And also, fantastically, you can actually remote into these tools. So someone who's an expert across the country, as long as there's internet access, he or she connect to this tool remotely, control it, upload the results, and then analyze them, again, any place in the world with internet access. Next slide, please. So let's give 2 real-world examples of that partnership between NetOps and SecOps. This first one actually was a regional government that had both a security and a network teams that were separate. They had multiple issues, struggling with 10 gig persistent intermittent issues from a link perspective, a lot of Wi-Fi complaints across the entire municipality. And then they also wanted the security team, better understand vulnerabilities of the network edge. They did have centralized tools, but they just had concern that there were some unmanaged devices and IoT devices that weren't being covered. And so specifically, the quote here is a new citywide 10 gig was having problems. 10 gig links were dropped, but they just had these sporadic issues that were kind of coming and going, and that forced them to make a decision. And the decision was to buy Cyberscope and resolve the problem once and for all. Next slide. So again, rapid troubleshooting of the city's 10 gig links. But once they had the tool, they were also able to do ongoing situational awareness of all the libraries, activity centers, city hall, what have you, right? So with this tool, you can just walk into the building, perform those tests, perform those surveys, upload the results, and understand specifically what's going on there. Again, the ongoing Wi-Fi surveys across the entire city makes it very simple. And then lastly, they were able to plug those gaps that Seamus spoke to earlier. There were some that were perceived and some that were actually real. And so with Cyberscope, they're able to augment their centralized tools, plug those gaps, and make sure that they were protected to the network edge. Next slide, please. So another classic example, Cyberscopes are used in educational facilities, K through 12, and higher ed all over the country and actually the world, right? And so we're constantly amazed at the ability of students, even high school students, but certainly higher ed, their ability to use their creativity, their cleverness, and their tenacity to look for and find potential openings that they can leverage to their advantage. The quote here really kind of captures it. Recently, a teacher complained a student was accessing inappropriate web content within a live classroom, right? And so Cyberscope was very quickly able to find out that they had circumvented the firewall and were able to stream that in and plug that hole, right? So again, in this case, it was a regional school authority. They wanted to both do validate network performance and then eliminate these evasion techniques and even rogue devices. And interestingly, on the next slide, I'll speak to some real network issues they were having as well. So in this case, very small team, just 2 people, security hat, networking hat. And the first real issue they were struggling with too, beyond the security one, was that, so when the school buses pull up in front of the actual school, students get off. This particular school district, and as many have, actually have video cameras running just in case there's any, well, shall we say this, malarkey that goes on in the actual bus ride. So the bus pulls up, and beyond the students, of course, getting out and going into the classroom, the idea was that those videos would be uploaded through the school's Wi-Fi up into a centralized location for archiving and what have you, right? Well, lo and behold, those uploads stopped working, And so the bus company kind of said, well, what goes wrong with your Wi-Fi here? What's the problem? They took out Cyberscope. They were able to figure out that, in fact, it wasn't the school's Wi-Fi whatsoever. It was an issue with the actual devices on the school bus. Problem solved, uploads occurring again. The world is copacetic, right, and square. Another example, repeatable testing of Wi-Fi surveys allow them to go through the classrooms of all these buildings to make sure that each particular classroom has got the coverage that they need before they get that dreaded phone call, as I said earlier, saying, where the students can't access the Wi-Fi, the class is stuck, we need some help here, right? And lastly, recently in the same school district, someone brought in a Wi-Fi pineapple, trying to use it to spin up an access point that they could, do with what they wanted in terms of accessing and using that information and capturing student credentials. Again, Cyberscope found that device, got it off the network, and the world, at least for a while, is back in equilibrium at this school district. Next slide, please. So I've talked about, building on what Seamus said earlier, I've talked a lot about both network and security challenges. I've kind of built off of what Seamus said about the criticality of network and security teams, whether they're together or separate, to be able to work with each other. Again, it's network edge and beyond. So what value does that offer, right? First of all, it boosts perimeter defenses, which is critical in this environment. Secondly, it facilitates cross-team partnering and collaboration. Seamus really talked about this earlier. It's one thing to kind of say, let's have partnerships, but you got to have tools and capabilities and communication paths between those organizations to make it a reality. Cyberscope can be a linchpin of that at the network edge in terms of helping those teams work together so that if there's any challenges from the security team or the network team can get to the security team whatever they need to solve a problem, ideally before it's a problem, by plugging those vulnerability gaps. Improving user satisfaction and reducing business risk. Again, we want to make sure the gaps are all plugged from a security perspective, but it does not preclude making sure that when people come onto that campus, they can get whatever level of network access they need to do their jobs or to connect, right? Mitigating headcount shortfalls and skills. With this tool, you can ship it between buildings. You can ship it across the country. Staff that are not that knowledgeable with the tool at all can actually work with the expert wherever he or she is to get those results they need, upload it to Link, and then solve the problem, again, whether it's networking or security related. The improving IT processes and security audits. As we talk to customers, it's about automating as much as possible. And when people talk about automation, sometimes they get these grandiose ideas about what that might mean, but it could just be a step-by-step process by which individuals can go through and know that in that particular situation, they've covered all the bases, whether network or security. And our tool makes it very simple to do that with Link Live. You can generate reports, you can share results, and get whatever information you need to whatever stakeholder required. And it can serve as part of the input into a security audit. And then lastly, as we spoke to earlier, zero trust initiatives, our tool is the perfect tool to really enable that, in particular at the network edge. And with that, next slide, please. Paul, do you want to talk about if we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, sure. It is time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to log them now. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Seamus, starting with you, are you seeing any impact from hybrid work on network and security collaboration?
Yes. This is something that I've been tracking in multiple pieces of research over the last couple of years. In the NextSecOps research that we published most recently, about 1 in 4 of the people in that research told us that hybrid work was driving collaboration with security. There are multiple reasons for that. One, there's people that when they came back in the office, they were more mobile. It's more of a Wi-Fi first connectivity approach, which means you got to adjust your like the days of Wi-Fi being like a guest access solution are over. It's more like enterprise user access now, and so you can't just assign a user to a port that's at their desk, right? That's pulled to the cable's pulled to the desk. They're no longer using that. they're working all over the place. You need a new approach to access control. Um, Security policy complexity has increased because a lot of these people are floating between home and the office. That means you probably want to consolidate policy around access to the network. So you can have one policy engine for whether they're for wherever they are. Like people are telling us they want to consolidate that. So networking and security teams are looking for a solution that can sort of provide universal access regardless of where the person is when they're working. Um, Also, they're bringing lots of devices into the office that they didn't used to bring. Like they're not gonna, they've got their company issued PC or Mac or book or whatever, but they're gonna bring their iPad. They're gonna bring wearables. Those things are gonna try to connect to the network. So you need to sort of tighten down the airspace, and think about whether you're gonna let any of that get attached, connected. Um, and they're also using new applications that they weren't using 5 years ago, especially like Zoom, Chat, which we're using right now, ChatGPT, all kinds of stuff that's going to be on your network that wasn't there before. So you want to sort of get tighter around or adjust your policies around what applications and services are sanctioned and unsanctioned, how you can sort of get more visibility into shadow adoption of things like AI. So network and security teams want to sort of work on that as well.
I would just add as well that we're likewise seeing exactly the same thing, Seamus, in terms of people bringing devices on campus. But the thing that always pops in my head right away is academia. But people, bringing their printers and bringing other things to bringing in, an access point or what have you to a gateway because they're having a little bit of connectivity problems. And, suddenly, this device shows up on the network with all the ports open and you're just like, where did that come from? And, who authorized that? And again, almost always benign, but still problematic, right? And so again, people, arriving, and then also, like you said, just in terms of people really expect, whether it's a worker coming in with their floating, cubicle, people really expect to be able to come in, sit down, power up, and connect and have great performance and all that. And that's a real change from even a few years ago. And again, this world of hybrid and what have you. But the demand is like, well, why? Why don't I have essentially instant, zero latency and infinite bandwidth, right? And so, the pressure's on for network and security teams to balance that pleasure and pain, so to speak, between the two.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brett and Seamus. Staying on the topic of collaboration, can you both expand on what should IT leaders do to encourage better collaboration?
Brad, do you want to go first this time since I took the last
Oh,
one?
sure. Well, I mean, I think, the process for them begins at just, facilitating those, it's maybe a bit of a platitude, but those channels of communication, just in the sense of like, if they don't have to be specifically knowledgeable down to the nuts and bolts or the packets per se, but it's pretty clear that in this environment right now, just given the amount of breaches that are out there and constantly being announced and just the dynamism that we're seeing in IT, that their role is to, get them in the room, so to speak, facilitate, the business value. They're thinking about business value, but, that manifests itself in terms of poor connectivity, breaches, and so forth, right? And so their job is to inculcate and ensure that the IT teams, to the extent possible, with the tools available, are working with each other to mitigate those, threats for potential threats. Because, it's long since gone when just, these breaches occur and they're benign and, you just have to kind of wipe the systems and start over. I mean, obviously, we just, turn on the news almost. There's always yet another day. I don't know how many times my name's been exposed, but I think, it's probably everywhere on the dark web by this point because it's just Equinox and what have you, the breaches. So I mean, I think their job is not to get the nut and bolts, but know that from a bottom line and a top line perspective, they need to facilitate it again within the context of their organization to make sure those two groups are working hand in hand.
I have I agree with that point about facilitating the conversation. Like IT leaders tell us that one of the big things they do is they sort of codify that. They they go to their middle management people, their directors, and say, let's define best practices and procedures that these groups should sort of learn and adopt and stick to to make sure that they're collaborating effectively and not sort of ignoring things like, oh, I don't need to call the security guy for this. I can handle this on my own. I'm just going to turn that device on and off and I'll fix it. No, no, no. You see a certain indicator, like go to this procedure, call this person, bring them in. Another thing they tell me is there's sometimes people in like director level positions that are protecting their turf. You have some middle management obstacles that need to be broken down. So you need to make sure that directors, managers, group vice presidents are not hostile to collaboration because they might be inclined to view that partnership as something that could lead to consolidation and elimination of their role or erosion of their power and responsibility. And so you want to make sure that they're not impeding collaboration. That might mean eliminating certain people or just making sure that they understand that collaboration is essential part of their function and essential part of their responsibility, so they are not an impediment to success. And then budget. You're gonna have to spend on certain things to make sure these people are working together. Maybe you gotta install a tool that the the two groups are using together, or learning on together, receiving training on their knowledge gaps might be another budget outlay. So that is a big piece of it as well. Is just you need to spend money sometimes. You can't just like tell people to work together and get their tools to work together. Like you might need to spend money on training, tools, technologies, infrastructure to provide them a basis for partnership.
Yeah, and I would just add, everything it's right on there, Seamus. And I would just say that ultimately, it's really in the security team's best interest. The rubber really hits the pavement with host and client devices talking on the network, and generally the network team has that kind of holy grail of information. And so, I mean, in terms of job security and so forth, but there's a high probability that there could be devices on that network that have vulnerabilities lurking, and your network team or who's ever responsible for that can be your best friend in terms of helping find those devices, especially if the heat is on and you believe something has occurred that could be problematic for the health of the environment. The network team can really be the source, the definitive source of the information you need to figure out, was an entry point, was there lateral movement. They can be just critical to eliminating it and plugging that hole. So
yeah.
Great insights. Thank you both. Brad, jumping over to you, is Cyberscope data available for use by other security solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a robust API that can connect to any of those centralized tools that you may have to facilitate that partnership. And we all know, having those multiple screens and what have you can be problematic. So with Cyberscope, specifically through Link Live. So again, data is captured within Cyberscope or any of our tools, by the way. We have a range of tools, and those are uploaded to Link Live. And once they're there, that information, whether it's a dashboard, raw information, even packet captures, can be shared through our robust API.
Thank you. And Seamus, I don't know if you can go back to the slide that's titled Local Gov Net Performance and Security. This question is, can you explain the product screen grab on this slide? Yes, right there.
Thank you, Seamus. Yeah, so great. Yeah, I kind of breezed through that, but this was a screen capture. It is a screen capture of discovery monitoring. And although it's a little bit hard to see, essentially each one of those rows are a day. And what it's done is it's gone back out Cyberscope each day or every other day. I think this was every other day, and done another discovery of all the devices on the network. And as you kind of look down that center column, you can see new, missing, or changed. And so a person could come in maybe over a weekend. Perhaps there's a open house at a local university or what have you. You've got all sorts of people coming and going. And again, depending upon the circumstances, there could have been something left behind or what have you. And so with discovery monitoring, you can run that and just check, hey, you go down this list. Okay, yep, that's a new printer we added. Yep, that's a new host, some clients. That all makes sense. And then suddenly like, wait a minute, Did you add access points? Did you add access points? No, well then what's this, right? So this tool automatically, it's color coded. You can sort, you can filter on specific types of new or missing, and very quickly understand specifically what's changed in your environment. And again, could be benign or it could not be benign. And again, our tool makes it very, very simple to find all those devices and figure out what specifically is going on at the network edge.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brad. Seamus, wrapping up with you, we have one final question. It is, why can't I just give security the tools they need to understand the network? I have them. They can just use them when they need to.
So I think I alluded to this already, but like one of the biggest challenges that network teams encounter when they're trying to partner with a security group is knowledge gaps, skills gaps. Like network team, a lot of network engineers will tell me that like their cybersecurity groups are very focused on hosts. They know a lot about protecting hosts. They know a lot about building security policy. They don't know a lot about network. They don't know a lot about traffic. They don't know how to they don't speak the same language. And you can give them a tool, but they'll look at it. They really won't necessarily know how to use it. Maybe even if you give them like a custom dashboard, the custom dashboard might not mean that much to them. Even if it's like reporting on all the things that they want to know about, like they still might not know what some of the terminology is. It's just, they might need guidance on how to look for things, how to ask for things even. So there's a lot of cross training that will need to take place before you can hand them the tool. And they may not want to know. Like they may just say like, this is what we want you to do in order to check for vulnerabilities. Like I don't want to do it. Like I don't have the time to do it. You don't understand how many times our network is attacked every day, you know, and like I am doing what I do to protect our assets in our digital environment. I need you to pick up the slack here and walk through our physical space with a cyberscope, or you know, give me a report on the health and performance of all of our firewalls. You know, like I don't have the time to check on it. I have the time to like review firewall rules, but I don't have the time to check on and troubleshoot that firewall, you know. So you do it because it's part of network operations as far as I'm concerned. So
It's funny,
that's why.
it's funny, Seamus, that's exactly what we're kind of seeing with, last couple of years since Cyberscope has come out, the same type of thing. And since it's the convergence of all these capabilities, we're definitely seeing that, not so much tension, but that thread that can be between those two teams, the security and the network teams, because of all the vulnerability capabilities, scanning capabilities of Cyberscope. At the same time, I prefer, cable testing or layers 1 to 7. We're definitely seeing the confluence of those two. And again, tools like Cyberscope can help bridge those gaps in a very tactical, feet on the street type of way. Again, we could speak abstractions all day long, but in the end, it's people working together to try to, solve both usability and plugging security gaps to keep things running streamlined. And again, we're certainly seeing those same things as we engage with customers and prospects with Cyberscope.
Thank you, Brad and Seamus, for taking those questions. And I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email with resources from today's event, so be sure to check that email out. Thank you again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.